Hey, how you doing? Let me know. So, what is it really like to move from a city, from the so-called rat race world, out to the country? How can we explain it? What's a really good example that you can relate to show you what it would be like if you're in a city, living in the rat race, got a job, driving to work, all of that stuff, and you're thinking about moving out to the country. What is it really like? Let's talk about it. Welcome to Goose Pond Hideout. Honk, 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 honk. With Rob. All right. So, what is it really like if you're a person, if you live in the city, the burbs, whatever, and you've got a traditional job and you're getting a little bit nervous, you're wondering what's going to happen with the housing market, are prices going to collapse pretty soon? Are you going to be without a job because of AI and all the uncertainty of the world? I mean, think about it. The internet only came along, a few couple decades ago. I mean, eBay started, I think, in like 95. So eBay is about 30 years old. Google itself only started in 97, 98. So it's not even that old. And most of the social media stuff, YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and Reels and TikTok and all that stuff, they started later than that. So, I mean, imagine what AI is going to do to your life. So you're thinking about, hey, maybe I'll move out to the country. So what's it like? And I was thinking about it this morning while I was drinking my coffee, and I thought, hey, I've got a perfect example, analogy that you can watch, and that'll explain exactly what it's like for you to move out to the country. And what I'm talking about is the movie Baby Boom. It came out, I believe it was 87, 1987, somewhere around in late 80s. I believe it was 87. And it stars Diane Keaton. And if you haven't watched it, you gotta watch it. And if you have watched it, it's probably a good idea to watch it again because you always get better, more information, when you watch something after you've let it digest and brew and settle for a while. And the synopsis of the movie, and I really relate to it, honestly, is as much as it sounds like I'm being silly, there's a lot of truths. Because what makes the movie so good is they take the reality of what's happening and kind of remember about like the show like Jerry Seinfeld, where it's a show about nothing, and they take real life behavior and they exaggerate it to the point that it's, making fun of it. And in the movie Baby Boom, I mean, basically Diane Keaton is a high-powered businesswoman in New York City, and she's technically married to her job, as you would expect a, multi, seven-figure income person that's living in New York. They're married to their career, to their job, and it's like an advertising, marketing, publicity kind of company. They help other companies sell their products better, right? And she's got a boyfriend, and it's everything. It's like they exaggerate the big city life, that it's all, real superficial and shallow. And there's one scene fairly early in the movie where they decide to make love, and they show the clock, and then they do the deed, and they show the clock, and it's like 2 minutes later. So that they're just trying to show, they're exaggerating, that superficial, shallow, like she has a boyfriend, but what kind of relationship is it really? And she's, again, married to her work, living in the city. And then she gets a letter. She inherits something from a far off distance. I think they're over in England or Europe or somewhere. Honestly, I don't remember exactly. But somebody, she inherits something. And so she shows up at the lawyer and she signs all the paperwork and she's all excited, wondering what the heck she's inheriting. And it's actually a baby. And they hand her a baby. And she's like, I can't take care of a baby. I got a meeting at 12:30 or and it really is kind of like what that city life is like, right? So she ends up, she online, just, never goes and visits. She buys this farm in Vermont, and it's like 40 acres or so, and it's got an apple orchard. And this is where the reality sets in, is the house is completely run down. And I can relate to that because when we bought our homestead here, we couldn't get homeowners insurance because the roof was completely shot. And her house, she needed a new roof. And we closed on our house in the middle of February. And, we were here and we, signed all the paperwork and transferred all the money and everything. And we bought the house in mid-February. And then we had to get all of our ducks in a row and everything because we were living on the sailboat. And we, packed up our stuff. And we moved up here in late March, right around, the first day of spring, kind of 21st, 22nd, right in that time frame. So about 5 weeks later, and we've driven up from the coast, and it's about 500 miles or so, something like that. And so 8, 9, 10 hours of driving in the car. So it's late at night and we're exhausted, and we come into the house and I go into the utility room and turn on the main breaker because I had the electricity shut off because it's like Green Acres. And I was afraid to leave it running for 5 weeks with nobody here. So I turn on the main breaker and we start turning on some lights. And I walk into our bedroom, the master bedroom. And it took me a minute or two. And I'm like, something's not right in here. And I was exhausted from driving all the way up. And I realized that a big chunk of the ceiling in the bedroom, the drywall, was laying on the floor. Like a huge chunk of it. And I'm like, yeah, well, we know it needed a new roof, but we didn't know it would have to be done that quick, right? Honest to gosh, drywall all over the floor. Thank goodness it wasn't on the bed. It was on the other side of the room. And, so I had to fix that right away. And I ended up putting a new roof on the house. And we redid the plumbing, and I redid the electrical. And so it wasn't like Green Acres. And those are all the things that she went through in the movie. And some of the other funny things are the mail person, like she's at the end of the run, and so the mail guy's drunk out of his mind by the time he gets to her house, and he just throws the mail out the window as he's driving by. And we had all kinds of issues with the mail when we first moved here, getting them to know that this was a house with an address. And because we were in the middle of no man's land, we had no internet, we had no cell service. I mean, this was no man's land at the time. And I remembered when we first moved here, the property was completely overgrown like a jungle. And so I bought a string trimmer, weed whacker, and I was going to go out and string trim everything. Well, I bought one of these big like face shields. It looked like a welder's mask. You could flip it up and flip it down. It was clear, but it looked just like a welder's mask. And I bought it from Amazon, and they couldn't deliver it. And it got lost in the mail. So they refunded me my money, and I'm like, well, that's great, because again, the mail was real iffy when we first moved here. About 3 months later, we come home from errands, and there's a box sitting on the porch, and it was the face mask. Honest to gosh, it was like 3 months later, and wherever it was, they finally figured out where to deliver it. And I got satellite internet. They finally were able to hook up satellite, and it's just all that craziness. And she was going out of her mind with all the repairs, the roof repair, and she had to connect to the county water line because her well went dry. and just, problem after problem. And there's a lot of reality, all that. We did all that. New roof, new electric, new plumbing, no cell service, crappy mail service. It takes a lot to get used to. And another aspect was she was bored out of her mind because, living in New York City, being a high-powered executive for a big firm, she didn't know what to do with herself. So she started making baby food with all that, because she had all the apple trees, and she ends up turning it into a business. And again, that's a real reality. When you move to the homestead and you don't know what to do with yourself, you've got to, figure out a way to generate some income. And because of things like YouTube and the internet and AI that's developing, is you just never know. So she kind of became an accidental entrepreneur with starting a baby food company because of, the need to do something with your time and using what was available to her. She had an orchard of apple trees, and so she developed this baby food company. So that's the kind of thing that, you never know what you might grow into while you're on your homestead. And, when she first got there, she like passed out, and she thought she was at a medical doctor, and she was on the table at a veterinarian. And they end up getting together, and they have really passionate relationship. The first time he kisses her, she like almost passes out from it, because it was so good, if you will. And that's just the funniness of, they exaggerate everything from city life to being in the country. and it's I really do recommend you watch the movie, because you do have to think about, they're exaggerating everything, but everything is truthful and is real. And when you move to the country, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with yourself so you don't get bored. And you're taking care of your chickens, and like here, Bonnie, got your puppy dogs with you that are enjoying. And she thinks about going back to the city, but she realizes that's not the life that she wants anymore. And she actually enjoys working in the house and having the baby play, on the floor, and not going to daycare, and scheduling, doing your own thing at your own pace, and that it really is a wonderful life. So be thinking about that, because I really want you to think seriously about getting out of the city, because it's just my opinion, but I think, we're looking at some sort of housing crash or economic crash, and it may not be real bad, it may just be a little bit, but with AI, with the changes, it's going to impact and change things. So you might as well change it yourself instead of waiting for the change to happen to you and be forced into making some kind of decision. So be thinking about that. Watch the movie Baby Boom. It's all about your freedom, right? Freedom! Happiness out in the woods, in the wilderness.